So we're going to go through all the games, obviously,
Right.
but I have a feeling we're going to spend a significant amount of time on our college countdown game. It wasn't specifically just Big Ten. This is Notre Dame included in this one, but Ohio State scores with no time. I correct that, with 1 second on the clock, as we saw they had to kick off afterwards. When it looked like multiple times in that second half, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, it's just like Ohio State didn't have the leadership at quarterback. They just didn't have enough bullets to come back against a really tough Notre Dame defense. I have a hard time believing that we're going to have a better game that we cover this year than what we just saw. So we just got off the field like 20 minutes ago in this Ohio State win. Joshua, I'll let you go first. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, give a ton of credit to Notre Dame in the way that they played, because there were moments specifically in that second half where they ran the ball at will, sustained extremely long drives. It looked like they were breaking the back of Ohio State, if we're being completely honest. But the true final offensive drive for Notre Dame, and Matt, I'll let you get into that a little bit deeper, but I think JT Tuimoloau stepped up big in that moment. Notre Dame made some mistakes, play calling wise, operation wise, that were big. And then for Kyle McCord, grew up in front of our eyes, Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, those guys stepping up.
It almost seemed like, I didn't mean to
go
cut you
ahead.
off, but it almost seemed like he has, I know he played high school football with Marvin, and he had a little ankle issue in the middle of the game. But it almost looks like he has a better rapport and connection. Like he knows where Emeka is going to be, and he's sitting in the soft parts of zones. Yes. It almost seems like they have a better relationship.
No, I mean, Emeka is an extremely talented player, but he's also a very smart player. And you can see it in the way that he runs routes and the way that he is able to manipulate zones. But those guys stepped up big when Marv couldn't be as much of a fixture for the Ohio State offense. I will go on record as saying that this is the best game that I've ever attended in person.
Wow.
I mean, it was phenomenal. It was a great battle.
Including games you played in?
Including games I played in. Like,
wow.
There's obviously those games were more emotional to me, but in terms of the quality of this game, the emotional swings, the back and forth, I think it was epic. It's what people want when they watch college sports. So ultimately, I think both teams deserve a ton of credit for the way that they played. You could tell that this meant a lot to either team. Two of the best brands in college football as well. I don't think we could have gotten more out of it.
I mean, it was an incredible game from start to finish. And a lot of people get enamored with the score, right? They want to see a 45-40, but this game was football at its best, right? Great defense. It was a grind all day long for the offense. It was sustained drives, but then it was stops, right? We saw it in the first half. We saw it in the fourth quarter, and it was Notre Dame early getting stopped on the 4th and 1, going out, and Sam Hartman breaks contain, tries to get it right, and he's not able to do that. And then you look later in the game, the stop that Notre Dame had when Ohio State's in the red zone, right? And so it was just this back and forth battle, and both teams just left it all out there on the field. And then you talked about the second to last series that Notre Dame had, or it was their last series, actually. They have control of the game.
Right.
They're up by 4 points at that point. It's the second down call where they fumble the ball. First down call, fumble the ball, right? They got to jump on that. They lose yardage, but then they come back and they throw a screen on second down.
Bless you.
When it's almost picked off, right?
Right.
And it was almost one of those, oh my gosh moments. But what that also does is it stopped the clock. It gave Ohio State more time on the clock.
And they needed all of that time.
They needed it. They didn't have to use a timeout. All those different circumstances come into play in a game like this. And then it was the kick. They get good field position. And like you said, Kyle McCord in this moment, there's so many questions about him. He was in a battle this offseason with Devin Bush, whether or not he was going to be the guy after the first few weeks. There was that question mark. He's kind of looking over his shoulder.
Devin Brown.
Devin Brown, sorry. Yeah. They finally named him the starter last week. You could see the confidence there. But this is the confidence boost that this team needed. The 3rd and 10, like you said, to Emeka Egbuka, Fleming on 4th down to extend the drive, keep it going, and then for them to punch it in with with 1 second left on the clock was just absolutely incredible.
I mean, that was kind of what I think a lot of people wanted to see out there too, because Ohio State had those 2 4th downs earlier on, and they did one where they tried to run like a flow pass concept.
Right.
They tried against Indiana. It didn't work against Indiana. Certainly didn't work against Notre Dame this evening. And then they ran a jet sweep. And for the last play, and I understand that Notre Dame only had 10 guys on the field, so it's the right call. I don't know if they knew that up in the box or not when they made the call. And the idea that you're going to say on our last play of the football game, we're going to run the ball. and the clock might stop and this might be over and we might not get in, but we are going to tell people what our mentality truly is. I think that stands out to a lot of folks. So again, just the battle back and forth and all the storylines leading into this one. I think the game really paid off on what people wanted to see this evening.
And also you got to talk about Notre Dame, right? Because they bring Sam Hartman in. He was a story of the game prior to starting about what he brings to this team, his leadership, his experience, his unique qualities on the field that he can do. And I believe that he lived up to that, especially when you get to the third and fourth quarter, they go on a 75-yard drive, and they were starting to establish that run, right? Jeremiah Love had the 16, had an 18. They started to all of a
sudden. They were leaning on him up front.
Leaning on him a little bit, right? And but it was third down conversions. It's putting the ball where he needs to go. And early in the game, it was him going through those progressions.
Yeah, and just standing
in there, and he was dissecting them just by doing what he was supposed to do. And that's such high quality quarterback play. And then all of a sudden you get backed up, you're on your own 4-yard line, you gotta go 96 yards. He hits the big play to Jaden Greathouse, right, which was a great play design. But then it's 3rd and 10. Right, it's crunch time. You've got to make a play, and he goes and he throws a beautiful seam route,
layered throw
over 2 backers, right where he needed to do. Understood there was a height advantage there for his guy.
So good.
And so that was the part to me that I was like, okay, it lived up to everything that you're looking for, right? And it had so much drama in the game, and that's why you got to love college football.
And last thing I'll say on the Notre Dame defensive side too, I mean, those guys were out there flying around. They're hitting. I know there's a question about Notre Dame and overall team speed and can they live up. I mean, those defensive backs, they were winning some battles out there against some really good wide receivers for Ohio State. Like if you're a Notre Dame fan and you watch that game, I would take away a lot of good things. You got the quarterback. The offensive line protected him for a vast majority of that ball game. Your wide receivers, I mean, just by committee, they had guys, wide receivers, tight ends that they were rolling through, targeting, and then defensively, those guys can flat out fly, and they play really hard. It's a good football team.
Yeah, the way they lost this game, they're still in the college football playoff picture. They're still in that, and they can play USC and get a win there. They got Duke coming up next, so they still have a lot of opportunities to build up that resume for them. The winning touchdown Chip Trayanum, is that how you say his last name?
Yep.
So I was watching there on the sideline, and I saw, and it wasn't early on. It was like Travion Henderson was in the game.
He was.
And there was probably about 25 seconds left on the play clock. They're kind of standing there wondering who's going to go in. Ryan Day brings him out and sends in the big back. And it turned out to be the proper move, and he gets in.
I mean, a lot of people probably thought it was for pass pro, right? Because Travion Henderson, I don't know if it was earlier on that drive where he missed that block. And Kyle got hit. Yeah, and so it's like, you bring in the bigger back, might be a better pass protector. All of a sudden, it's like, now we're running this thing downhill.
So it's Ryan Day. It's a big moment for him. And you could tell after the game, Catherine Tappan, we have to talk about this before we move on to our next game. I mean, Lou Holtz, 86 years old? We were considering him to bang the drum, but we caught, when, I mean, he's 86 years old, right? And it's a big drum, and it's a big baton to hit the drum. So we chose not to do that, but Ryan Day's still going after him afterwards because Lou Holtz had said that the toughness was the reason that Ohio State was losing some of these big games.
Lou Holtz was on Pat McAfee's show on Friday and made comments about how Ryan Day loses the big games because of toughness. Pointed to Michigan twice, where Michigan did have their way in terms of running the football in both of those games. Pointed to the Georgia game, Alabama game against Clemson earlier on. So Ryan Day, I don't think he was watching Pat McAfee on a Friday afternoon. Somebody must have sent him the clip.
It was personal.
Yeah, and I mean,
oh my God, that's the most emotional I have seen Ryan Day ever.
But I mean, you all as men getting called soft. I mean, as a football coach, as a football team, as a football player, about one of the most disrespectful things somebody could call you.
Sure.
So if there's one thing that's going to fire up a coach like that, I think that would be it.
You say we choke the big games, I'll let that slide. You say we're not tough,
right?
I'm coming after you, Lou Holtz, 86 years old.
And I've said this before, the whole thing about Ryan Day, and I know that it comes down to one game usually every single year with Michigan, and he's lost those last 2 years, but his resume speaks for itself.
It's really
this
good.
Guy is a heck of a football coach. He has his team ready to play each and every week. We talked about the game last year against Georgia.
Yep.
Marvin Harrison Jr. is out in the fourth quarter.
Right.
They're up 18 points.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's one of those situations where they're on the cusp of going to the national championship. And let's be honest, if they go into that game, they probably do the same thing that Georgia does.
No doubt.
This is not only a great football program, but it's also because of his leadership and what he's able to do. Now, down the road when they play Michigan, you know, that whole narrative about what they're going to do this year will come back up. Of course it does, because that's what this rivalry is about. But at the end of the day, this guy is a heck of a football coach, and he's taken this team to places that I don't know if there's a lot of other coaches that can do what he's done.
It's a tough part about coaching in Columbus, though.
Yep.
Is you're judged off of the big ones,
Expectations.
right? I mean, nobody cares if you beat Indiana every time you go out there.
Yeah, but you better beat Indiana.
Right.
You better you beat all your rivals.
Sure.
You win the national championship and you beat everyone else. That's,
Yeah,
that's the
that's-
expectation.
That's the expectation, right? There's only one national champ, but it's got to be you every year.